Here we go. Another theorist. Um, this guy's going to be, it's going to be kind of hard for you to tie him into personality. I'll do as much of that for you as I can. Uh, and he's not such a heavy hitter in personality theory as some of the others we've already talked about this session. So we're going to be talking about Albert Bandura, Bandura. You'll see him. I think that chapter is, I don't know, 14. I'm not sure. You'll find it. Albert Bandura. His theory has to do with social learning. As a matter of fact, that was the initial name of it, social learning theory. And as he worked with it, he refined it, and it later became known as social cognitive theory, which is when you read about him, modern journals, etc., textbooks, so on and so forth, that's what you read about. You read about social cognitive theory. There's several things that made him pertinent, made him relevant, beginning with this rather odd experiment that had ramifications that he called the Bobo doll experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with a Bobo doll. They were popular more up north in the United States than down here. We had a version of it, but it wasn't called a Bobo doll. It was a toy for younger kids, 4 to 6. And all it was an inflatable cone made out of beach ball material. And it was about, I don't know, 36 inches tall, maybe a little taller. It had the Bobo doll had a clown painted on it. There was a kid show up north called Bobo Clown, and they sold merchandise, and the Bobo doll was one of those. And the bottom of it was rounded and had sand in the bottom of it. So you punch it and knock it over, and it'd come back up to a standing position. And it became a very popular toy for kids up there, and there were versions of it here. What's that got to do with Albert Bandura? He used that in this Bobo doll experiment. His postulate was, his hypothesis was, that children would repeat what they observed. So what he did was he set up this room that had a two-way mirror with a camera, and he could video children. He could video children's behaviors in their interaction with this Bobo doll. But first he would show them a little video clip of someone interacting with the doll. Either the person interacting with the doll was being kind and loving to the doll, or it would be a more violent video where the person that was interacting with the doll was punching it and kicking it. And then he would show one or the other video to a 4 to 6-year-old child, I think was the age range, and then leave them alone with the Bobo doll and observe through the two-way mirror how they interacted with the doll. And it was obvious that children who had observed the violent video beat the doll up, and the children who had observed the kind video treated the Bobo doll kindly. So from that, he devised these 4 key learning components. Now these came from his social learning theory, which evolved into the social cognitive theory. So the 4 key components were these. Attention. You have to notice the behavior. And some of these are pretty obvious. You have to notice the behavior. Secondly, you have to remember what you saw. So that's called retention. So we have attention and retention. Then you have the reproduction phase, so the reproduction component. You need the ability to imitate the behavior. It's a little misleading because I'm not going to show a 4-year-old how to build a house. It would have to be relevant to the observer's age. So in this case, Bobo doll fit the bill. And then finally, motivation. You need a reason or an incentive to do the behavior. In this case, basically observation. You could really get into some deep learning here because they learned by watching the video how to interact with the doll without any Lev Vygotsky type scaffolding. So if they saw violence, they repeated the violence. If they saw kindness, they repeated the kindness. People try to apply that to the violence now in our nation and around the world, basically, based on kids watching violent video games. There's no basis for that. There's no scientific basis to support that. There have been experiments with it, and they have noticed that middle school kids who were given the opportunity to watch violent video games tended to be more aggressive on the playground than those who in the experimental group that didn't. So maybe there's some basis for it. There's a lot more study that needs to be done. He established also this idea of self-efficacy. And that self-efficacy definition that he uses is your own belief in your ability to succeed at specific tasks, not selling yourself short. So these were just the beginnings prior to social cognitive that led into social cognitive theory. Right now we're still working in social learning theory. So self-efficacy was described as I just did for you, and then what he observed in people who he deemed to have self-efficacy, high self-efficacy, were those who set challenging goals, persisted through difficulties, and then recovered quickly from setbacks. You can kind of parallel that with high self-esteem or strong self-confidence. And that led him to his social cognitive theory. Social cognitive theory added the role of cognition and reciprocal determinism. That's a strong sounding little term, reciprocal determinism. Cognition is understanding, fancy word for that. Reciprocal determinism means that things around you have an effect on you, and you in turn have an effect on them, and vice versa. And his argument about that was that behavior and personal factors, for example, thoughts, and the environment all interact and influence each other, which is easy to understand. Think about your day as you go through it and how much interaction there is with those things and people around you. And with all of that in mind, he tried to put this into a real-world application. And they've had a pretty decent impact. They've had an impact on education. We use modeling in student education that helps them with self-efficacy, at least we hope it does. It's used in therapy, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Sometimes include modeling and goal setting, working with depression, for example. And in media studies, and I mentioned that a moment ago, how does violence affect real-life behavior? Again, there's not indisputable evidence that watching a violent video game could affect your behavior unless it was something out of the ordinary. Somebody that did this 8 hours a day, for example, and then carried that over into their everyday behaviors. So basically, Bandura taught that learning is social and that believing in ourselves matters. I won't elaborate on believing in ourselves other than to say that that is in the realm of self-esteem, self-confidence, and in fact self-efficacy. So there you have it. I'll see you next week.